Welcome to Simply Science from Nature Education. I'm Adam Weiss, and I'm here with Dr. Scott Doney at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, where he's a senior scientist who looks at the oceans and the atmosphere and how they interact. And we're going to talk about CO2 and what we do to the oceans and what that then may do back to us. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Adam.
So we pump a lot of carbon dioxide into the air, and some of that ends up in the ocean, and you look at what happens when it gets there, right?
Right. Well, one of the things that people don't fully appreciate is how much carbon we release. And it's coming from many different sources. It comes from power plants, it comes from cars and buses. It even comes from the forests in the tropics that are being cut down. So deforestation can lead to a lot of carbon release. And what I've been involved in over the last, say, 20 years is trying to understand what happens to that carbon. If it stays in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide gas, it can lead to global warming. But we think only about half the carbon that we release from fossil fuels stays there. The rest goes back into other plants and soils on land, or it gets taken up by the ocean. And so we've been trying to document that and understand what the effects are.
And when you say the CO2 gets absorbed by the ocean, there are plants in the ocean. There are little single-celled plants that suck up a lot of CO2. There are larger plants, but the ocean water itself also absorbs CO2.
Right. Seawater is just like a carbonated beverage. It has a lot of carbon in it already, and we're increasing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and that actually just sucks carbon into the surface ocean. And when that water sinks, say up near the poles where it's very cold, you get water that sinks all the way to the bottom. That actually removes carbon away from the atmosphere and will help us slow global warming because the atmosphere won't see that carbon for many hundreds of years.
So that sounds like a good thing, being able to remove carbon dioxide from the air just by having it come in contact with water. But I know that even just from a simple examination by tasting regular water and carbonated water, they're very different. So what does it do to the water to put carbon dioxide in it?
Yeah, we've been working for a long time under the premise of, the more carbon that's in the ocean, the less in the atmosphere. That's a great thing because there'll be less global warming. We'll slow global warming. And we knew that more carbon dioxide would make the water more acidic. It actually combines with water and forms a weak acid. What we didn't realize until about 10 years ago is how sensitive many plants and animals are to that rising acidity. And it's plants and animals that make shells or skeletons out of calcium carbonate. So this is the same material that's in chalk. And it's many things you can think of. It's corals, it's oysters, a lot of mussels. It's even some microscopic plankton that makes small little shells out of calcium carbonate. And what we found is that rising acidity actually makes it harder for many of these plants and animals to grow.
So we are doing something to the air, which is doing something to water, which is doing something to the things that live in the water, which some of us rely on for food.
One of the things we've been trying to look at right now is how important coral reefs and particularly shellfish are to many communities along the coast, fishing communities, but also in the developing world. There's a lot of island nations and a lot of rather poor developing countries that depend a lot on aquaculture, growing shellfish. And what we don't really know yet is, as we change the planet, as we do this experiment of releasing all this carbon, who's going to suffer? And how do we balance that with our desire to drive a big SUV or have electricity on demand everywhere? And so there are trade-offs that we're trying to understand.
Well, it's good that there are scientists like you that are monitoring that experiment, and you look at it on the large-scale level with remote sensing and with ships, and you can see what we do. So it's good to know that there are people paying attention to what's going on as we put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, as some of it gets removed, and see what that does in the future, and maybe we'll make some better decisions based on that. So thank you very much for what you do and for being on the show.
You're welcome.